Story Podcast. My name is Melanie Nevis.
And I'm Tegan Aline.
And welcome to season 6. We are going to kind of go back to where we started and delve into the world of fairy tales. We were chatting, and there's just so many fairy tales, and we've done a lot of the Disney ones. I think we'll continue because there are just so many, but inevitably
We really only scratched the surface before.
We did. And there's fairy tales from all over the world. Not just myths, but fairy tales.
And they're really fun to explore, actually. So, yeah, I think we've always said we would probably revisit this a few times through the show. So, I mean, I think after 6 seasons.
Yeah, we're on season 6.
Yeah. Let's return to what got us into this in the first place, right?
Yeah, I love fairy tales. They're just so fun.
And they're really interesting.
Today, they are. Today, we are going to talk about our favorite little liar, Pinocchio.
Oh, yay! Oh, this is a good one. I feel like this story in general just has an air of sadness to it almost.
Well,
for me anyway.
It's a really, why is that?
Because Pinocchio wants to be a real boy.
Okay. That's the sticking point that a lot of people remember, I guess.
Yeah.
He just wants to be a real boy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So Disney produced this first animated musical fantasy film, Pinocchio, in 1940. And it was the studio's second animated feature after Snow White, which, if we remember, came out in 1937. So just 3 years later. And Snow White was this huge success. And it did receive critical acclaim. Like, Pinocchio received critical acclaim when it came out. It actually won 2 Oscars. Mm-hmm. One for Best Music with original score, and another for Best Music with original song, which was When You Wish Upon a Star.
Yeah, like that song is so famous. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Big critical acclaim. However, let's remember, we're in the middle of World War II. So it was a commercial failure. And this is because during World War II, there was the markets to European and Asian markets from the States were basically cut off. So when it re-released in 1945, that is when it actually made a profit. So after the war is when it made a profit, which really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what do you remember about the Disney story, other than Pinocchio wants to be a real boy?
I'm a real boy. I'm a real boy. Now I'm just thinking of Shrek 2, when she turns him into a real boy for a second, and then she changes him back, and then he's like, oh. Honestly, I don't remember a lot about Pinocchio. I remember that his dad's name, or his dad, I hate to say dad, but it's like the guy who made him, right?
Yeah.
His name is Geppetto.
Yeah.
His name is Geppetto. I know that there is a cricket that's kind of like a magical little cricket. And maybe it's the one that tells him to wish upon a star. I don't know. I know that there's a hiking boot store where I go in the summer called Geppetto's. And the first year I went hiking, I bought my boots there, and I was like, I bought boots from Geppetto's. And then I went hiking, and while I was out in the mountains, there was a little grasshopper on my boot. And I was like, this is amazing.
I thought you were going to say the logo was a cricket or something.
No, it was Geppetto's, but then there was a cricket on my boot out in the mountains.
That's cute.
And I was like,
that's really cute.
This is so full circle. But that's kind of what I remember. And I don't remember any of the shady stuff, actually. I haven't seen this film or heard or retold or listened to this story in not since I was a kid, I don't think.
I think that's it. I think we remember those highlights basically, and we often forget that Pinocchio actually got into quite a bit of trouble.
Yeah, I know he did. I know there was something menacing in it, but I can't remember.
Yeah, to be completely honest, neither did I.
Yeah.
Neither did I. So it takes place in the 19th century. This is the Disney version. When the woodworker named Geppetto sees a falling star, and he wishes that the puppet he had just finished, who he named Pinocchio, could become a real boy. And in the night, the blue fairy grants Geppetto's wish, and brings Pinocchio to life, but he still remains a puppet. She tells Pinocchio that if he proves to be brave, truthful, and unselfish, he will become a real boy. And then when Jiminy Cricket, who is the narrator of the film, reveals himself, the blue fairy assigns him to be Pinocchio's conscience because he's just like a marionette doll. He doesn't really have one.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, true.
Geppetto wakes up because Pinocchio tries to walk around. So Geppetto wakes up hearing the commotion of Pinocchio falling. And he's just super happy to see that he's become a real boy because Pinocchio, in his eyes, is a real boy, even though he's
In
still
almost
a
every
marionette.
other story situation in the world, a marionette coming alive is actually like a horror story.
Well, it's Chucky.
I just I just realized that like while you were telling this to me, I was like, in every other story where we see like a doll like that come alive, it's actually related to horror, but not in this case, which is
Well,
wild.
I told you about that stupid seance I went to, and there was a really fucking creepy doll. I swear to
Nobody
God, was
likes a
staring at
creepy
me. And
doll. Yeah.
the most terrifying thing anyways, that's a story for
And then
another
it was
day.
like, I'm a real boy. I'm a real boy.
So Pinocchio is, a quote unquote boy, a live boy, not a real boy exactly, but he's an alive boy. And he's a little bit naive, and in the process, he joins
Shocking.
Stromboli's puppet show. He's led
Oh,
astray
right.
by, yeah, he's led astray
Yeah.
by lots of different characters. He becomes a little bit dishonest, which we know causes his nose to grow longer and longer every time
Oh,
he
yeah.
lies. And there's just lots of adventures, but eventually Pinocchio does prove that he is those three things: the brave, truthful, and unselfish. By rescuing his creator, Geppetto, from like this crazy whale. And it seems like Pinocchio kind of sacrifices himself
A
in the
whale.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Starting to
they
remember
think
all
that
this stuff.
Pinocchio dies. Yeah. They think Pinocchio dies. But in true Disney fashion, the Blue Fairy comes back and she's like, actually, he's alive. Let me give you a real human boy.
Okay.
So she transforms him to a real human boy. Everyone's super excited. And Jiminy Cricket is rewarded with a solid gold badge that certifies him as an official conscience to Pinocchio.
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Because even as a real boy, he doesn't have a conscience? Well, that's
Apparently
saying
not.
something, isn't it? We
I
could
know.
just assign crickets to all the real boys out there. That'd be great. That'd be great.
So it's very much a Disney ending. It's a heartwarming tale about a character that goes astray and is led back to a good path. And it's the story that you tell to provide a child of moral behavior, right? If you're
Yes.
good, if you're virtuous, if you're brave and truthful and all of these things, like, you are a good person. And this is the path that you should be leading, right?
Right. Yeah.
The problem, as with most Disney tales, the problem with this version of Pinocchio is that it doesn't really resemble the original tale of the Italian puppet, which is a bit darker than the one that Disney told in 1940. Now, this is not a Brothers Grimm story. It's not like crazy, crazy dark.
The
Okay.
Italian stories are darker, though, I feel
They're
like.
they're darker, but it's not like a Cinderella with the sisters who get their eyes plucked out and chop off their heels. It's not like that kind of gruesome dark,
Yeah,
you know?
okay. Mhm, mhm.
Um, Disney based this film on a novel that was published in serial format in the early 1880s as The Adventures of Pinocchio. And serial format, for anyone that doesn't know, is basically things would be published in magazines or journals or newspapers,
Mm,
just a couple chapters at a time. And it would,
mhm.
every time it came out, a few more chapters came out. So that's the format that
Interesting.
it was published in. And he wrote this. The Italian author's name is Carlo Lorenzini, and he wrote this serial under the pen name Carlo Collodi. And Collodi is a real place in Italy. It's about 72 or 73 kilometers west of Florence. And in miles, that's 45 miles.
I
Okay,
miss
for any
Italy.
people. I know, Italy's amazing. I was saying yesterday, I've been dreaming about going back to Italy lately, and I'm like, should I
Yeah.
go?
I went to I went to Italy last summer just for one day because you can drive like to
Mm-hmm.
the border of Italy, and we went to
Yeah.
Quino, which is just like on the other side. And there was
Yeah.
this crazy market shopping. Like we didn't know what we were gonna find. We just went, and there was like a huge, huge shopping market. I got the coolest bag ever for $20, and Michael was convinced it was a hot bag, which it might have been. I haven't been able to prove him wrong so far, but it's like the nicest bag I've ever bought for $20.
Nice.
And also,
Honestly.
I just miss the gluten free everything there. They're
Yeah, because this is a real misconception. Everyone thinks like, yes, Italy is the
little
land of bread and
unknown
pasta, but
fact.
they have so many gluten-free grocery stores and so many gluten-free things there. It's honestly a
Yes,
celiac's dream.
it is. It's actually voted one of the best countries in the world to travel to for celiacs.
Yeah, it's a
It's
celiac
impressive.
stream. It's amazing because yeah, you can't really do wheat. Kale can't do wheat from North America because glyphosate is sprayed on all our crops. So Italy actually banned the import of Canadian wheat
No way.
because
Yeah, no, I'm not so
yeah,
shocked,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
it's
Anyways,
crazy. Yeah, sorry. Digression.
another side
Italy is
tangent
cool, okay?
actually. Italy's really cool. Another side
Slightly in a bad
tangent.
political place right now, but for
Well,
traveling, like,
as we'll learn today, it has been in a bad political place for quite some time. No, I'm kidding.
okay.
Well, a lot of places have, but
Mm-hmm.
um,
True fact.
so 72 to 73 kilometers or 45 miles west of Florence. And I was actually gonna say I watched a TikTok lately or recently, and what they said is really true. Canadians, yes, we use kilometers to measure distance, but when we're actually talking about how long it takes to get from one place to another, we just use hours. Like, I know that it
Yeah.
takes 6 to 7 hours to get from Toronto to Montreal. It takes about 5 hours to get from Toronto to Ottawa. I couldn't tell you how many kilometers that
No.
is.
Ours makes way more sense. It's way easier
It
to
does.
mentally digest, I think.
Yeah, right? I
I
know
don't
it
know.
takes about an hour to get out of Toronto minimum.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Collodi is west of Florence. It's set on a slope behind this beautiful 17th century villa, and the
Mm.
garden has terraces, flower beds, some marble statues,
Mm.
fountains, grand staircases.
Sounds
It's a
lush.
Baroque villa, okay?
Okay.
17th century
Ooh,
Baroque.
damn.
And you walk around and follow this path up the hill behind the villa, and then you reach the town of Collodi.
Mm.
And these the houses in this town, they're built of stone. It's a very different reality. It's all cobblestone streets. In the piazza there's communal sinks for laundry. It's the town is older than the villa itself. It was
Mhm.
probably built on top of this hill for just strategic fortification reasons,
Mhm.
like strategic defense.
Mhm.
But it's probably where the working class people lived, and they are the ones who would have tended to the nobility's villa, to the gardens, and things like that.
Right,
And
makes sense.
although, yeah, in the first half of the 19th century, Carlo Lorenzini, although he was originally from Florence, he spent really long stretches of his childhood living in Collodi with his relatives. So when he became a writer, he really loved this place and took the pen name Collodi, basically. So he became Carlo Collodi. And he was a political activist in his early adult years. He fought in the Italian Wars of Independence and Unification from
Mhm.
1948 through to the or 1848, sorry, through to the early 1860s. And for those of you who don't know, the Italian Wars of Independence and Unification basically sought to remove the influence of Austria from the peninsula and unite the various Italian states, because there were lots of city states and lots of different kingdoms and zones basically,
Yeah.
into one nation. So like if anyone goes to Italy and you realize there's a billion different dialects and little rivalries everywhere, like this is part of the reason why
Everywhere.
everywhere up until, and I think the unification that happened, it happened relatively recently in history. These were all different places. These were all different city states. So a lot of the dialects and rivalries exist, and they'll continue to exist at this point for quite some time, but they exist because it wasn't that long ago that they were all separate.
Yeah, it's really prevalent in the we're not Central Europe. Well, we're Western Europe. The Western European countries, you see that a lot. Like it's the same here.
Yeah, exactly. So he was very deeply critical of Europe's social and political state at the time. He often wrote allegorical stories to satirize Italian and European society. And in the 1870s, he began working on a story about a rascally little character who would express his views on society, basically. And he wrote this as La storia di un burattino, or the story of a puppet, which was published again in serial format in an Italian journal in 1881 and
Oh
1882.
wow! He starts out as a political satire.
Yeah,
What? That's
yeah.
wild. Okay.
I know, interesting, right? And then this
So
work
wild.
was brought together and published in one edition as L'avventure di Pinocchio, or The Adventures of Pinocchio, in 1883. And it was an instant hit, and it's basically remained pretty popular since, because it is a parable of the human condition. Like, that's
Mhm.
in every version, you
It
see this
is.
quite a bit. It's a parable of the human condition. And it's
Wow.
opening, yeah, it's interesting, right?
It's super fascinating.
There's a lot of political stuff in this story. And the most recent adaptation to have come out in a film that kind of reflects these policies or political things would have been Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. That
Oh, I
came out, what,
haven't
just a
seen
couple of
it.
it's just a couple of years ago.
Oh, I
That's
haven't
probably the
seen it.
closest version to this, because he really based it off of Collodi's version. And
Mm.
there's tons of interviews with Del Toro as well, where he talks about all the different political facets of the story, like the fact that fascism is a really big underlying factor in this.
Mm-hmm.
Because Geppetto himself in the story, he's not the Geppetto that we see in the Disney version. He is angry. His son went off to war and died and didn't come back. So he's really angry, and he just wants to create another child. He just wants another son. He is a drunkard. He is not your ideal father figure, because he's in the throes of
Mm.
desperation and depression. And
Mm.
that's largely related to the fascism regime that was happening in Italy at the time.
Wow.
That's kind of what
Wow.
Del Toro based his thing off of.
This is really cool. This is like unlike any of the fairy tales that we have really uncovered, like discussed so far.
Yeah, because
Wow.
it's real. There's a lot of politics involved in this, and Claudio or Claudio. I read Pinocchio, and that's what came out. Collodi, Collodi was a political activist, and he really embedded a lot of that into this story. And it starts
Wow.
in a really interesting way, where the opening line is, "Once upon a time, there was a king." My little readers will no doubt say in a flash, "No, kids, you got it wrong. Once upon a time, there was a piece of wood."
No. Oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. That's I would love to know like the I would love to hear the full like we probably don't have time on this one, but I'd love to hear the I'd love to read the full version of the original
If
Pinocchio.
anyone is interested in reading the full version, it's a little bit long. It's 128 pages, and you can find it online if you literally type into Google Adventures of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi. And if that doesn't come up, then type in University of Chicago Pinocchio Carlo Collodi. It will come up in a PDF version that you can read online.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So that piece of wood becomes Pinocchio, and the story became the first internationally known work of Italian children's literature.
Hmm.
So Lorenzini's Pinocchio, or Carletti's Pinocchio, I'll kind of go back and forth between the two depending on whichever one comes to my head first.
So it's kind of like it's a very recent
It is.
incomparably
Yeah,
story.
very, very recent.
So when Disney takes it on, it's still pretty,
It's 60 years old.
yeah. But that's like, I mean, in a lot of these fairy tales that we've covered, like that's pretty recent, right?
Yeah, I mean, any Brothers Grimm version, the thing with the Brothers Grimm is that they were often taking from things that were even older than them. So,
Hmm.
although Brothers Grimm versions were written in the 1800s as well, they were not new stories. They were new versions of the
Hmm.
story, whereas this is like a brand new story that someone wrote. So yeah,
Interesting.
it's super modern. Yeah.
Hmm.
So in the original story, the puppet is not led astray by other figures who exploit his naivety, as in the Disney film. He's kind of naturally a bit of a little shit from the
Hmm.
beginning.
Hmm.
Like, as soon as he can walk, his first action is to kick Geppetto and run away into town.
Okay. Sounds like something a bratty kid would do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. His first action is to kick his creator and run into town where he's found by an Italian policeman. And there's a bunch of people around who are like, "Oh no, Geppetto will kill him. He like is so mean to young boys and blah blah blah." And you see this before Geppetto even makes Pinocchio, where he gets the wood from. He gets it from his friend, and or friend, I say that lightly. I mean, like, I say that with quotation marks, someone he knows, because they're friends, but they get into an altercation like from the very beginning.
Oh, wow.
Geppetto is, you can see that he's an angry person. He like gets into fights and things like that.
Hmm. Interesting.
So all of these people around are like, Geppetto's not a bad guy, but he can be really terrible to young children. And so the police officer assumes that Geppetto has mistreated or will mistreat Pinocchio. And there's this reputation that he has for being cruel and will likely beat Pinocchio. And so the puppeteer is arrested and sent to prison.
Oh,
Geppetto's arrested and sent to prison.
damn. Bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, I guess that's kind of like a good moral, isn't it?
It's a good moral. I think it's also really interesting because at that point we know that kids were beaten.
Yeah, like don't beat your kids.
So Carlo Collodi's idea of how children should be treated already is a very clear statement where he's just like, hey, don't do this.
Don't beat your kids.
He's a really progressive thinker for his time. Like, he's a really interesting person,
I
it
would
seems
say
like.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Geppetto goes to prison. So Jiminy Cricket, who has been alive for more than 100 years, shows up and warns Pinocchio about being hedonistic and untruthful. And he says things like, "Woe to boys who refuse to obey their parents and run away from home. They will never be happy in this world. And when they are older, they will be very sorry for it." And things like, "Poor little silly, don't you know that if you go on like that, you will grow into a perfect donkey and that you'll be the laughing stock of everyone?"
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think Pinocchio's reaction to this is? It's quite different
Shove
from
him
the
in the
film that we
kidneys.
know.
No, he just like kicks him in the shins and runs away, like with his dad.
he gets um he gets really angry. So in the original, he gets angry enough to throw a hammer at Jiminy and he kills him. Bye
No,
bye Cricket.
what?
Yeah.
Plot twist. He
Yeah.
kills Jiminy Cricket.
He kills Jiminy Cricket.
Yo, Pinocchio sounds kind of evil. But also I really see him as a like a pinnacle of like like a young dumb kid who doesn't like fully understand the world yet, but
Yeah.
is already kind of like basing his ideas of just or simply around the things that he wants. Like you can see it.
Yeah. He is
Very interesting.
completely a selfish character. And
Wow.
another
Wow.
difference that exists in the Disney film Geppetto is this maker of toys and cuckoo clocks. He lives in a very quaint little half timber house. Geppetto, from Collodi's version, speaks to the poverty of Italy at the time,
Hmm.
because
Okay.
Italy was going through a lot of poverty at the time.
Hmm.
And in the book, Geppetto is a struggling wood carver. So Pinocchio spends a lot of the story filled with anxiety about finding something to eat.
Okay.
On his very first day after Geppetto has gotten arrested, he experiences a hunger so real it could be cut with a knife, is what the book says.
Wow.
And when Geppetto returns home, he ends up offering the puppet the 3 pears he had intended for his own breakfast, and that's all he has for food. And Pinocchio at first demands that they be peeled and cored. And at the end of it, he ends up just eating everything, peels and cores included, because the lesson to be learned is we mustn't be too finicky or dainty in our eating. And this theme of food and hunger is repeated throughout the story.
And life. Like
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of all of the Italian families I grew up around, and like you just do not fuck with food. Like you do not waste food, right?
No, you don't waste food. And I think it was really born out of this time when food was really
Hmm.
scarce.
Hmm.
And a
I
lot of
totally.
people were living in poverty, right?
I think even as a kid growing up, I was like my family, my parents made me aware of, because like I feel like everybody's parents kind of always made I think in Canada at least, our parents always made us aware of that. Either people had come out of that situation, or, people just, you just don't waste food. I don't know. I grew up being told not to
I
waste food.
think if you grow up without a whole lot of money, or if you grow up from with parents who grew up without a whole lot of money, you do not
Yes.
waste food. If you grow up privileged, I've met a lot of affluent people who just don't give a fuck.
Wow.
They
I
never had
don't
to
even
worry
know what
about it.
that's like. I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither.
I've only experienced, I think, food security truly for the first time since living in France, because the cost of it is so much
Is a
more
lot
affordable.
more
It's
reasonable. Yeah,
it's so
I
much more
know.
affordable
I
here
went
compared
grocery
to
shopping
North America.
yesterday and oh, everyone, like most of the things that people talk about here right now are the weather and the cost of groceries.
Oh, I've seen all of the parodies of like a girl basically like emptying out her savings account to buy a bag of carrots. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's like rent, weather, groceries. Those are the three main topics.
I think I've said it before, when I first came here and I was in Paris and I went into a grocery store and I found a salmon rillette, and rillette is like kind of like a special, I don't know how to explain rillette exactly, but it's a special kind of almost like a pate. And I
Mhm.
found salmon rillette, which looked really nice and fancy to me, and it was like $1. And I was like, "Is this good quality?" And Mike was like, "Yeah, it's great." And I was
Yeah.
like, "But it's $1, like it's a
Yeah.
euro."
I
He was like,
know.
"No, it's fine." And like you really can, like even in the most expensive parts of this country, you can get some bread and some pate and some cheese, probably if you're super French, and
Yeah.
it won't cost you an arm and a leg, and you could like just like eat that until it's gone if you needed to, you know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
yeah, food is like a huge thing. So I mean, it's weird. Sometimes I feel like we're living in the past, almost, in certain aspects. It's obviously not, but like in certain aspects it kind of feels like that, you know what I mean?
There's a lot of things going on right now, and I think
Mhm.
that this is why a lot of people are actually harkening back to the past and like creating their own natural remedies and creating their own natural
Oh, for
cleaning
sure.
products and doing all of this stuff because a big part of it is we can't afford to go out and buy it anymore.
Yeah.
And like why not get back to the natural thing? But I think a lot of it stems from the fact that people just can't afford to go out and do that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always that layer of privilege where people, you know, there's different layers of privilege, and not all of those layers of privilege are next necessarily bad. Like it's not like you want people to necessarily have to embody like like, like it would be nice if people could be food secure.
Yeah,
It'd be nice if they didn't have to stuff
absolutely.
stuff themselves ridiculous just to finish their meal so they're not wasting, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
there's a lot of nuances and grooves in that, but yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interesting. I had no idea that Pinocchio was going to take us down this road. Anyways.
Once Geppetto is released from prison, he comes back, he feeds Pinocchio the pears. Those are that's the only food that he had for himself, and he gives it to Pinocchio. Geppetto then convinces Pinocchio to attend schools, and he sells his only coat in order to buy the puppet his school books. So Geppetto,
I feel
for all
bad
his
for
faults,
Geppetto
is
in
gonna
this.
yeah, he's like a bit of a brute at the beginning, but he's also trying to
He sounds really
um
sad as a
he
person
is really sad.
and
He's really
trying.
sad and angry. Yeah. And his whole arc is like his change from sad and angry to like kind of what it is to then become an actual father figure, which
Interesting.
is really interesting.
Really cool.
But he sells his only coat to buy the puppet his school books. And the following day, Pinocchio sets off, but he never makes it to school. Instead, he sells his books to buy tickets to the Great Marionette Theater and So it goes. There's a bunch of adventures with Pinocchio being led astray in some instances, but also engaging in very selfish and idiotic behavior in
Mm.
others.
Sounds like every teenager under the age of 22.
Collodi creates
Tell me I'm
this
wrong.
world that is, no, you're not, that is dangerous, and where he didn't always intend to be merciful to his protagonist. Like there's a scene in chapter 15 where Pinocchio is hanging from an oak tree, killed by 2 assassins.
Holy moly.
And this is actually where Collodi wanted the story to end, but journal editors and readers wanted it to continue. So in chapters 16 and 17, Pinocchio is basically saved by the blue-haired fairy, who initially appears as the little girl with blue hair and is described as the ghost of a dead girl. And there might actually be a real person that Collodi based this off of, someone who was really like dear to him,
Oh, really?
that seem to embody these characteristics of just like an altruistic, really helpful, wonderful person.
Interesting.
Yeah. And after the blue-haired fairies send some helpers to rescue Pinocchio from his hanging, a falcon cuts him down from his noose, and then a poodle dressed up as a coachman drives him home. And she
Okay.
realizes that Pinocchio has a high fever and pours him some medicine, but he refuses to take the medicine. Like, even after almost dying, he's just like, no, this is going to be bitter. I don't want it. And she tries to bribe him with some sugar, right? Spoonful of sugar.
Yeah.
He just eats the sugar and he says, I'd rather die than drink that nasty medicine.
Sounds
And
like a bratty
so,
kid, yeah.
yeah, 4 black rabbits arrive carrying a coffin to take him away. And then Pinocchio grabs the medicine and drinks it all down.
Okay.
It immediately works after a few minutes because we learn that, I mean, puppets just have the privilege of not really getting sick that often, and then they get better really fast.
Right, wood. Wood and all.
Exactly. So it's a dangerous world, but Pinocchio survives being hanged, burned, thrown in the ocean.
Good grief.
And at the end of the story, Pinocchio has to face one last temptation, which is the ill-fated trip to the land of toys. And then in the Disney version, they call this Pleasure Island, which is like a little bit
Oh.
of a cringy name.
Right. Oh, I saw some really creepy stuff on social media around that and
Yeah.
Epstein and them
Yeah.
talking about Pleasure Island and the oh my god. Okay.
Yeah. So originally it was called the Land of Toys. Disney changed it to be Pleasure Island. It was originally just the Land of Toys. And this is basically a fantastic haven for wayward children to do whatever they want with little to no consequence or law. They can act as they please without any trouble. But the actual purpose is a little more sinister. The Land of Toys eventually, when kids are there long enough, they get a disease called donkey fever. It affects children who never study or work, and the children physically begin turning into donkeys. And if you remember at the beginning, I said that quote that Geppetto warned him about, where he was just
Yep.
like, you're going to become a donkey. In Italian culture, the donkey is a symbol of ignorance and stupidity, or goofiness and labor. So once
Mm.
Pinocchio and his friends become donkeys, Pinocchio is bought by the owner of a circus who wants to teach him to do tricks. And the donkey becomes lame and is then sold to a man who wants to use his skin for a drumhead. So a stone is tied around his neck, a rope is tied to one of its hind legs, and then he's pushed into the water. Okay. And his new
Okay.
master sits on the cliff waiting for him to drown so that he could make himself a drumhead. But, and here's that theme of hunger again a little bit, the fish in there eats that layer of donkey off of him, and
Ugh.
then it frees Pinocchio again.
Okay. Oh man. Sorry. I'm very quiet right now cuz I my whole stomach just went bleh. As soon as we started talking about the Pleasure Island, I was just like this got really dark so suddenly. And of
Yeah.
course, I'm relating it to like things that I've seen in the news and the media about like Jeffrey Epstein and stuff, but like
Yes.
I've seen a lot of
This is a
correlations
different
between
version,
this.
right? This is a
Yeah,
different
yeah,
version,
yeah.
though. This is
No, no,
just
no.
like,
I know, but it's just like
I know, but your
psychologically,
mind,
I'm
yeah,
immediately
yeah, I
like,
know.
oh. And then like you keep telling the
I
story, and
know.
it's like this now the thing is like it got to do whatever it wanted, it was free, but now and gets sold to be used and
Yeah,
it's
he
lame.
becomes
So
a
then you
donkey.
get sold
Mm,
again to become like to be skinned.
yeah.
Okay.
This is
Okay.
how we treat animals.
Oh my god. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, tummy flips, tummy flips.
Okay. So, yeah, the fever that turns Pinocchio into a donkey is his punishment for skipping school and running off to the land of toys.
Hmm.
Like I said, he'd been warned by the cricket, and the term donkey has this double meaning in Collodi's Italian. And people
Hmm.
who work hard were called donkeys, but so were children who refused to apply themselves in school. So
How does that
Collodi's
make
message
sense?
to children at a time where like there was this life of unskilled labor, and where the life of unskilled labor was one of hardship, is that if they insist on being donkeys at school, then they risked living the life or maybe dying the death of a donkey.
So
That's
your
kind of the message
parents
that's being
your
conveyed
parents
there.
shouldn't beat you, but you should still try your best to be good, go to school and like, do your due diligence in life because
Yeah.
otherwise
Yeah.
you get trafficked.
At the end of the story, Pinocchio is able to redeem himself by rescuing Geppetto from the belly, not of a whale this time, but of a great shark.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
slight change there. And that's because Collodi's own father had to be rescued from debt, and predatory lenders are called loan sharks, right?
Right.
The
Okay.
term kind of exists in Italian as well, in the Florentine dialect.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's the belly of a great shark. And after Pinocchio saves Geppetto, he then works to provide for his father's health and studies hard at night. And in the end, he becomes a ragazzino per bene, a good little kid, basically.
Oh God, after
Um,
all that, he reforms. Thank God.
yeah, the wooden puppet is basically transformed into this like smart, lively, beautiful child with brown hair and blue eyes, who's happy and joyful as a spring lamb, like da da da. But a lot happens in this story, and I haven't even really scratched the surface. There is kind of a monologue that Pinocchio has at the end when he finds Geppetto of his adventures, and I could. It's up to you whether or not you want me to read it out to you.
Yeah, read it.
Yeah. Okay.
Am
This
I gonna
is
get am I
from
gonna get sad? Am I gonna get scared? Am I gonna get tummy flippy?
No, this is just like the list basically of
Okay. Yeah,
things.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
he
Let's hear what he got up to. Oh
basically,
fucker.
Geppetto is looking for Pinocchio. And once Pinocchio finds Geppetto, and I'll kind of go into that a little bit later, he tells Geppetto what he's been up to for the last 2 years, because
Hmm.
he has been gone for 2 years. So that's how long his
Yes.
adventures have taken.
Okay.
Oh, but if only you knew how many misfortunes have befallen on my head and how many troubles I have had. Just think that on that day you sold me your old coat to buy me my ABC book so that I could go to school, I ran away to the Marionette Theater, and the proprietor caught me and wanted to burn me to cook his roast lamb.
Mm.
He was the one who gave me the 5 gold pieces for you, but I met the fox and the cat who took me to the Inn of the Red Lobster. There they ate like wolves, and I left the inn alone, and I met the assassins in the wood. I ran, and they ran after me, always after me, till they hanged me to the branch of a giant oak tree. Then the fairy of the azure hair sent the coach to rescue me, and the doctors, after looking at me, said, "If he is not dead, then he is surely alive." And then I told a lie, and my nose began to grow. It grew and it grew until I couldn't get through the door of the room. And then I went with the fox and the cat into the field of wonders to bury the gold pieces. The parrot laughed at me. Instead of the 2,000 gold pieces, I found none. And when the judge heard I had been robbed, he sent me to jail to make the thieves happy. And when I came away, I saw a fine bunch of grapes hanging on the vine. The trap caught me, and the farmer put a collar on me and made me a watchdog. He found out I was innocent when I caught the weasels, and he let me go.
Oh
The
my God.
serpent with the tail that smoked started to laugh, and a vein in his chest broke, so I went back to the fairy's house. She was dead. And the pigeon, seeing me crying, said to me, "I have seen your father in the building a boat to look for you in America." And I said to him, "Oh, if only I had wings." And he said to me, "Do you want to go see your father?" And I said, "Perhaps, but how?" And he said, "Get on my back. I'll take you there." We flew all night long, and the next morning there was a fisherman, and we were looking out towards the sea crying, 'There's a poor little man drowning,' and I knew it was you, because my heart told me so, and I waved to you from shore." And then Geppetto speaks back and he's like, "I wanted to go to you, but how could I? The sea was rough and there was white caps and overturned the boat. And then a terrible shark came up out of the sea. And as soon as he saw me in the water, swam quickly toward me, put out his tongue and swallowed me as easily as I would have been a chocolate peppermint." So at this point, we learn that Geppetto has been in the shark's belly for
Yeah.
2 years. It's felt like 200. He was able to survive because the shark also ate an entire ship. And the ship was loaded with meat and cheese and preserved food and sugar and wax candles and like all sorts of stuff. But
Scandals.
he was basically, yeah, he was basically all of these, out of all of these things. So, like, the day that Pinocchio goes to rescue him is the day that he's like, well, this is the very last day that I have food and the last bit of light in my candle. And I don't know what's going to happen afterwards. So Pinocchio devises this plan to swim back up out of the shark's mouth towards freedom because because the shark is old and has asthma, he tends to sleep with his mouth open.
Wow.
But Geppetto can't swim, so Pinocchio tells him to hold on to his back and they escape to the shore. And that act is the one that kind of turns Pinocchio into this living, breathing boy.
I
So
see.
there's a lot of major plays or like themes at play in this work.
Mm-hmm.
Education is a big one. It's a cause that's very dear to Collodi's heart. In 1861, again, there's numerous republics and city states, each one with its own dialect. And when the nation kind of unified to become Italy, all of a sudden children were learning to be Italians for the first time. And when the country unified, only 25% of Italians could read and write. And by 1880, so like 20 years later, there was free compulsory schooling and it had raised the literacy rate to nearly 40%. So that's a
Wow.
huge jump in just
Huge.
20 years.
Huge, huge, huge. Mm-hmm.
But Collodi is also very aware that children couldn't be expected to learn if they were hungry. So he actually wrote an open letter called Bread and Books, and he argued that all humans needed to eat, drink, be protected by the elements, and have a place to sleep,
Mm.
which seems so commonplace now. Like these are basic amenities and expectations now. But at the
No, of
time of
course, yeah.
fascism, especially, this is a really huge political statement to put out there. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
there are so many themes of hungers. Like throughout the story, there's this risk of being eaten in a world where everyone's always hungry. Like Pinocchio is almost used as a log for a fire. He is coated in flour at one point and almost fried in a pan with a bunch of other fish. And the fisherman is looking forward to trying like a puppet fish, you know?
Oh my. Yeah.
The whole thing with the donkey, he's thrown into the sea and then the fish eat this donkey layer off of him. So like there's all these themes of hunger. And then again, like Geppetto is swallowed by a shark.
Yes.
So it's a really harsh world, and Collodi basically thinks that the only way out is through education. Another political message that Carlotti was sending at one point in that monologue, I had mentioned the fox and the cat and Pinocchio getting some money taken from
Right.
him. Pinocchio takes his complaint to the courtroom, and the judge, who is an ape, and he's very respected by his honorable age and his white beard, and particularly his gold rimmed glasses, which actually don't have any lenses. Um,
Okay.
okay, the whole adventure basically warns readers to not really expect very much of the justice system. Instead of having his grievance addressed, Pinocchio is thrown into jail because he was the victim of a crime. And
Mm.
then
Yeah.
when a general amnesty is issued throughout the prison, he is told he is not eligible because he himself is not a criminal. And so he has to convince the jailers that he is also a crook in order to be released from prison. So that's a huge political message right there where Collodi is just like, you cannot trust the judicial system. They're all a bunch of crooks. And so
Still
he
holds
throughout
true.
this throughout this story, he basically satirizes the corruption of business and government and points to the absurdity of social class, points to the injustices of that exist in society at the time. And so for that reason, Pinocchio, it's like very different from any other of the fairy tales we've discussed. This is the first one of the season, but if you go back to the very first season, if you listen, we discussed a lot of fairy tales at that time as well. This is totally different because it really is a political stance on a lot of things that were happening
Truly.
on the time. And Collodi, for that reason, is a really fascinating individual. And it's a really
Absolutely.
interesting story because it's a true reflection of Italian society at this time.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I feel like I've learned so much from this story. And it's funny because I think honestly like Pinocchio is one of my relatively less favorites, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
But now I can really appreciate it for all of these layers. It's right really
The
interesting.
original story has so much depth to it. So, again, if you want to go out and read it, you can just Google it online. You will come up with a PDF of the original story. And it is fascinating. It's got way more depth to it than Disney's version. Disney can't hold the candle to it. It's so cool.
That's so interesting. I wonder if that's going to
Yeah.
be a theme of this season. But we'll only know towards the end, but new depths of
It
these
might be a
stories.
hodgepodge, but who knows?
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. Anyways, wow. Well, honestly, I feel like I've learned so much from this and really gave me insight. And in the beginning, I was kind of feeling bad, like I was laughing a lot, like quietly while we were just breaking into the conversation. And it was because after I said that stuff about Shrek, like I was like, yeah, most of my fond memories of Pinocchio are from Shrek.
Are from Shrek.
And then I was like thinking about that scene again in the second one where they were like, tell a lie. And he's like, well, about what? I don't know. They're like, I don't know. Say you're wearing a thong. And he's like, I'm not wearing a thong. And then his nose grows. And then like the gingerbread man is like, are you wearing a thong? Hey guys, it's pink. And I was thinking of that and I was laughing and I'm like, don't think about that. That's but after hearing what a little fucker this guy was, I mean, like I don't feel so bad about it. Is my point.
He was a little bit of an ass, but all of these trials that he faces, especially towards the end, it kind of causes him to grow up and realize
And
what a shit
trauma will
he's
do that to you.
been. Yeah. And Geppetto, same thing. Like he kind of has this opportunity. He is angry. He's really sad and angry, but he has this opportunity to be a father again, and in his own way ends up trying to take it. Like he goes out to rescue Geppetto. He's building a boat to try and find him because he thinks he's gone to America. He doesn't know where his little boy's been for 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so
Yeah.
he's, or not that long maybe, but like because he was in the belly of the beast for 2 years, but he doesn't know where Geppetto is and he's trying to find him. And you only do that if you actually kind of care.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Geppetto or Pinocchio?
Shit, Pinocchio.
I think it's oh yeah, it's huge. You see major growth in the two characters, which is
Mm-hmm.
also really interesting, especially just on the perspective of like men in general and their relationships with their sons and stuff.
In that way, like it being a human parable is still very much true. It's still very much a story of morality and of being good. It's just the ways in which they get there is really quite different from the Disney version.
Yeah. Shit. I'm so sorry. Not me choking on my words. Yeah.
All
Absolutely.
right.
I completely agree with you.
And
Oh.
on that note, I think that we will leave it there for today.
Yeah.
So remember to follow on Instagram, Allegory Story Podcast, and send us an email if you want to give us any topics or I don't know, whatever. Send us an email at allegorystorypodcast at
What's your
gmail.com.
favorite fairy tale? If we haven't covered your favorite fairy tale, let
Yeah,
us know.
actually, when we post a little thing of the episodes of this season, comment on it and let us know what other fairy tales that we should do. We'd be very keen to know, or email us at allegorystorypodcast@gmail.com.
Absolutely.
That's it. I think we'll leave you there for today. So I hope that you've enjoyed and hope to see you again next week.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's going to be. So we'll see you then.
It's going to be good. Either way, it's going to be good. Okay, bye.